Spirit has a message for you about your purpose in a past life. If you want to hear that message, all you need to do is pick one of these 3 piles, use your intuition, and whichever pile sticks out to you the most, that is your message. We have pile 1, which is a flower. We have pile 2, which is a compass. And then we have pile 3, which is a mushroom. If you need to, you can pause the video and meditate on your choices, but once you know which pile is yours, you can scroll to that part of the video in the time bar or go down to the description or comments of the video to click on the link and go directly to that part of the video. So let's go ahead and get started and find out what your purpose in your past life is. Hello, pile 1, welcome to your message. Let's go ahead and get started by pulling one card from the Archetypes Oracle deck to figure out what is the main theme of your purpose in a past life. What was the archetype specifically that you were living out? Spirit, what is pile 1's archetype? All right, pile 1, your archetype is the gem. You were either a gem or you were living out a gem-faced life. This is multifaceted. This is brilliance. This is wealth. This is luxury. So you were definitely involved with some sort of luxury. I want to actually figure out the context of your archetype being the gem. So let's go ahead and pull some additional cards. Spirit, what are the details behind pile 1's gem archetype? All right, the first card is the Chariot reversed, some sort of lack of movement. We have the 9 of Rods, feeling as if you don't have allies. We have the Knight of Swords, someone who does something brave but a little bit impulsive. Then we have the Queen of Swords, someone who is very rational. They have emotional abilities, but they're really focused on doing things logically. And then we have the Queen of Pentacles, someone who's able to balance 2 different worlds. And what I really got this weird sense is that your purpose in the past life was to find wealth, but the way you found wealth was through adventure. Now, a lot of your spread is female coded, and obviously in the past, women were limited in how they could really live out specific lifestyles, but it seems as if you were a woman in this past life, or you were at least someone who had a very limited scope to what they could do, but you had a secret life. You had some sort of alternate persona that you hid from the people around you. One of the things I was thinking of was an adventurer. Right? So you may have been someone on perhaps the Silk Road or someone dealing with trade, because then you would be able to go to different places. And because you were in all of these different places, you were able to cast off your wealthy identity in order to really experience what life had. But let's get into that a little bit. With the Chariot reverse, there is this sense that you weren't able to travel as far as you liked. You were very limited in your circumstances, and you didn't have a lot of people around you. Now, because I did get this sense that you are an adventurer, that you're probably a merchant, it may not be that you were on the road all the time. You may have been relocated to basically like trade hubs with your family, to where somewhere on the Silk Road or any other mercantile trading route, you would have basically been parked. It would have been away from your native homeland, but you would have been parked in this new place. And while your family members were off trading probably your male family members. You used the fact that they were away to explore this new location, to explore the gems of that new location. And with the Knight of Swords here, this is a very strong indication that you weren't really prepared for this location. You may not have initially known the language, the people, the customs, and you weren't really prepared to deal with that, but you were very brave because you wanted to see what was on offer. Now, the Queen of Swords, because it is someone who is very logical and rational and has this ability to be emotional and do emotional things, but kind of taps it down, this is a sense that you may have been a cross-dresser. Like, I'm really getting this sense of someone who hides their identity in order to go out in public. And obviously we can normally tell the difference between men and women when they're in clothes, but back in those days, what men and women could wear would be so strictly regulated that if you saw someone in the opposite gender's clothes, sometimes you would just be, well, I guess they're a really effeminate man or a really masculine woman. And I think you took advantage of that. You were a very, very clever person, and you use people's prejudices and even cultural customs in order to step into an alternate role and live that alternate role. And with this Queen of Pentacles card, this living in two worlds or balancing two things, your second life, your alternate life, was you actually building wealth. So I'm definitely getting the sense that your purpose in a past life, other than being an adventurer, is to build wealth for yourself. So let's figure out why you were doing that. Spirit, what was pile one doing? Why were they building wealth? What was the outcome? We'll pull 6 cards in 3 sets. Why was this happening? So the first 3 cards is why you were doing this, and then the second 3 cards is going to be what was the outcome. All right. So the first card we have is the Ten of Swords, which is about ruin. The next card is the King of Pentacles reverse. This could be perhaps an older male patriarch who was really terrible with money, like they weren't actually a good trader. You may have been really worried that you would be stranded in this foreign place with absolutely no wealth, perhaps abandoned or completely impoverished. So you knew that you had to find the gem, the money, the wealth in order to have your own security. We did have the Death card, so there is a transformation. This worry wasn't unfounded. At some point in your past life, you did actually have to step into your second life and make it your primary life. So your purpose was preparation, essentially. It was preparation to live by yourself in a foreign land. Now, the next card, the outcome, we have the Eight of Cups, which is about this emotional leaving or a sojourn. We have the Fool, which is about some sort of a mistake. And then we have the Seven of Rods, which is about being in a high position, but constantly having to defend yourself. And I really do think that your male family member who likely went into debt or was no longer able to basically finance the hub that you were stationed in resulted in you having to flee town with whatever secret wealth you had, and you weren't entirely prepared. You weren't, because your second life was almost a hobby to you, but once it actually became the real thing, you really had to almost live and die by the sword. You had to really take in all of the consequences of your decisions, and many of those consequences weren't in your favor. But ultimately, with the Seven of Rods, this does indicate that you were able to eventually stabilize. But throughout much of the rest of your life, you were constantly worried that you were going to lose things. So it could be that because you had this alternate life and you basically fled in the night, that you were unable to reconnect with your own people or return home. So you were essentially stranded in this foreign country, but you did make a place for yourself. And because you were an outsider, it was really hard for you to stabilize that lifestyle. But let's see what sort of life lessons you learned with the Soul's Journey lesson deck. Spirit, what were some of the lessons that pile 1 learned? What was it that pile 1 learned? Especially that affects them now, karmically. So the first card is Doubt. I release the need to know all answers. So one thing this life taught you is that sometimes your circumstances can change dramatically and you can be filled with doubt about your future because of that. But you're basically learning in that life and in this one, the carryover lesson, that you need to not assume the future is what you're going to envision it to be. You need to be comfortable with things changing from what you expect. The next card is Loneliness. I know that I am never alone. Even though your past life was someone who basically became stranded in a new world, you weren't able to get home, I do think your past self did make allies, did make friends, and because of that, they weren't alone. Your past life maybe got married, had children, had friendships, had business connections, and in this life, now when you are feeling loneliness, you are starting to realize that you can make new connections in new places, even when you feel like an alien. Sometimes being an alien, being someone who doesn't quite fit, can actually make you stand out, and you'll befriend other people who are also aliens or strangers in that particular setting. Your last card today is Growth. I want to expand my consciousness and my awareness. So you were definitely meant in your past life and in this one to explore your spirituality. Now, obviously, in your past life, part of that was exploring a culture different from your own, perhaps integrating or syncretizing those beliefs or even adopting those beliefs. This would be like if someone was a Catholic in Italy and then they went on the Silk Road and they ended up either converting to another religion or at least adopting some of those practices into their daily life in a mystical sense. And I think you really found this rewarding, and that may be why you are attracted to things like tarot in this life, because you want to try new things, you want to integrate a whole bunch of practices, and this is probably just one of them. And I would encourage you to try new things and new practices, even if you don't adopt them in an orthodox way. You can learn about those practices and then take what resonates with you and make it part of your regular life. So pile 1, you had a really exciting pile today. I'm actually quite surprised where it took us. So I hope that this reading was a blessing for you. If it resonated, be sure to like and subscribe for more. You can also go down into the comments in the description of this video for links to my socials, or to book a private reading with me if that sounds amazing to you. Otherwise, pile 1, I wish you so many blessings. Pile 2, welcome to your reading. Let's see what message Spirit has for you about your purpose in a past life. The first thing we're going to do is figure out what sort of archetype you lived in your past life. So we're going to pull some cards from the Archetypes Oracle deck. Spirit, what was pile 2's archetype in their past life? What was their archetype? All right, your archetype was the mentor. you mentored somebody or you were mentored by someone else. Let's get the context. We are going to pull 5 cards from the Mary Hanson Roberts Tarot deck. Spirit, what are the details about Pile 2's mentorship? What were the details? Were they the mentor, or did they mentor someone, or were they mentored? All right, the first card is the Lovers reversed, some sort of broken partnership. The next card is the Knight of Swords, being unprepared, but doing things anyway in a brave manner. We have the Wheel of Fortune reversed, things being unlucky or a cycle broken. We have the Magician reversed, someone being manipulative. And then we have the Nine of Swords, anxiety. My impression is that in your past life, you had a mentor who was actually quite negative and you broke up with them. You decided you weren't going to be mentored by them. Now, this could take a lot of forms. It could be maybe you were apprenticed to someone, or you joined an organization and you were supposed to have a teacher, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work out and you weren't prepared for your future because of that. But even though you weren't prepared, you weren't trained effectively, you bravely pushed forward through almost insurmountable obstacles, and likely this mentor that you broke away from trying to sabotage your future, and you were very, very anxious about that. So in your past life, it really does seem as if your purpose was trying to break free from an oppressive individual, someone who was trying to control you, who was trying to ruin you, and your purpose was to be free of them. I also think you were likely supposed to heal that wound and become a mentor for someone else in a very positive way. But let's pull some cards. Let's figure out some more details about who that mentor was and what was the result of you breaking away. Spirit, what were the details here? Let's expand. What else would you like Pile 2 to know? So we have the Fool reversed. We have the Ace of Swords reversed. And then we have the Moon reversed. So when it comes to this mentor person, the Fool reverse is an indication that they weren't a good mentor. It's not like it was just a difference of opinion and personalities clashing. This mentor really was awful. They were a terrible teacher. They shouldn't have ever mentored you in the first place, or perhaps anyone. They made terrible decisions. They said terrible things to you, and some sort of secret was revealed, perhaps to your larger community. The fact that they were a terrible person was revealed. So let's see the outcome here. We have the Eight of Rods, things happening very, very quickly. The Two of Pentacles, not being able to balance things. And then we have the Page of Cups. So my impression here, because the Page of Cups is an unhappy surprise, is that when your mentor's life was essentially ruined by you revealing to the world how terrible they truly were, they went to war with you. They did everything they could to try to ruin you. Now, I actually do get the sense, for some reason in these cards, even though it's not showing it, that your community in general supported you. And I think it's because of the Knight of Swords card, where you bravely went forward, sort of like you were a whistleblower, and they did support you. But whoever this person was, they had connections, they had allies. Maybe they brought in people from the outside, but they did everything they could to make your life so much worse. But let's figure out if you were able to overcome that in this life. We're going to pull 3 more cards. 3 more cards. Were you able to overcome it? We got the Star, Happy Fate. We got Justice, so yes. And then we got the 10 of Cups, which is about things aren't being happy. So I do think that this was a Pyrrhic victory. And that means that yes, fate looked on you fondly. You were able to get justice for this person that abused their mentorship and tried to ruin your life. Like, they probably went to prison, they were kicked out of the family, they face consequences for the decision. But because of all this negative energy here, I do think it is possible with the 10 of Cups reverse card that this battle resulted in you perhaps not being able to start a family, you weren't able to find a spouse, or you ended up getting divorced. For example, if this was like a mother-in-law situation and you are a woman in the past life, then this could have resulted in you successfully getting a divorce from this negative family, but then you weren't able to either get remarried or have contact with your children. And so I do think that while justice was served and while you did exactly what you were supposed to in this life, you weren't able to actually be a mentor going forward. Like, you were able to make your mentor face justice, but you didn't have the opportunity with the 10 of Cups reverse card here to mentor others. And so I think in this life, part of what you're meant to do is mentor someone. Now, that could be professionally, it could be someone in the community, it could be a child. That could be the case for a lot of you if you were a woman in the past life, that you're meant to have kids or have a positive connection with children. That way you can raise them up and make them look at people and say, yeah, there are good people out there. But let's go ahead and get some soul lesson cards to round out the reading. Spirit, what are some soul lessons from this experience? What are some soul lessons? What is important to know? All right, the first card is discipline. I can accomplish what I set my mind to. Now, with the Knight of Swords, which is about someone being unprepared for their circumstances, this is a strong sign that you didn't have what you needed to do to be successful. And that could be why you were unable to eventually have a mentorship. You couldn't mentor someone else because you were never taught. You had a lot of cool things, you've learned a lot of cool things in practice, but you didn't have the proper theory. And in this life, you are actually learning to do things the correct way. You are learning how to integrate that so you can mentor someone in this life. We have the growth card. I want to expand my consciousness and my awareness. So part of your lesson in this life that affects you from your past life is that you are learning how to identify negative people and try to either avoid ever being in a position where they have power over you, or if they do get power over you, that you leave as early as possible so you can be liberated from their influence. You may have also learned how to connect with the community and break their cycles of abuse. That way they can't take control of the situation. That way your recovery period is a lot shorter and you can move to your personal bliss a lot quicker. Then we have the envy card. I am the same as everybody, but with different challenges. So in your past life, you were probably the talk of the town, right? Like, this broken mentorship was probably quite scandalous. And in this life, what you are learning is how to have an ordinary tragedy or an ordinary challenge, right? So your mentorships in this life, your negative relationships with people of power is going to be a lot less aggressive. It's going to be a lot less scandalous. It's going to be a lot less public. And that is your higher self trying to protect you from the absolute drama of your past life. Like, that was really overwhelming. And I do think that you sometimes envy other people now, where you look at them and you wonder, why is their life so easy? And that's part of your past life talking. It's part of your past life recognizing that they didn't get to do everything they wanted because they didn't get to have the same timeline as everyone else. And so anytime you recognize that you don't have the ordinary timeline that your peers have, you get worried. You're living in your past self, and you're worried that you're not going to be able to live out your purpose of being mentored and then mentoring other people. But one thing to realize is that you are going to have that. In your past life, you didn't get to mentor someone at all, but in this life, you are going to be able to do that. You are going to be able to have that 10 of Cups domestic bliss sort of situation where you have a very positive relationship with whoever you're mentoring. So pile 2, this was a great reading. Your past life was really, really stressful, but I definitely saw that you got justice, and that's definitely going to be echoed in this life. If you resonated with this reading, be sure to like and subscribe for more. You can also go down into the comments or description of this video for links to my socials or to book a private tarot reading with me. Otherwise, pile 2, I wish you so many blessings. Hello pile 3, my mushroom pile, welcome to your reading. We are going to see what Spirit has to say about your purpose in a past life. And we're going to start with your archetype card. Spirit, what was pile 3's archetype in their past life? What was their archetype? So your archetype in the past life was the sword. You definitely were in something military or battle related. Let's get the context around that. We're going to pull some cards from the Mary Hanson Roberts Tarot deck. Spirit, what is the context here? Were they a warrior? Did they meet a warrior? What was going on? We have the 9 of Rods. This is about having allies in a difficult situation. We have the 9 of Cups reversed, about a wish not being fulfilled. We have the Strength card. You are obviously strong. We have the 3 of Swords reverse card. This is about overcoming heartbreak or things being clear. And then we have the 10 of Rods reverse. This is about obligations, responsibilities being relieved. So my impression seeing these first few cards is that yes, you were in some sort of army or military. You had fellow soldiers, the 9 of Rods. You went into battle and you managed to avoid a near death. The 9 of Cups card, my instant thought when I saw this card was that you were drafted. You didn't want to go into war, but you had to. You were likely not a professional soldier, so you may not have been born into like the Middle Ages until they started actually drafting regular people, or you were part in a past life of a smaller situation like tribal warfare where everybody had to fight, and you obviously did not want to fight, but you were actually a very, very good soldier. You were very good at what you did. You either had some training, like some basic sword training, some basic fighting training, and you actually turned out to be very, very good. But the Strength card, it's also almost about innocence, and you were a very, very good person. And even though you were like this amazing fighter, you were probably really good at killing, it didn't taint your soul, right? And then the 3 of Swords reverse, about overcoming heartbreak, you survived. You were able to come home from war. You were able to rebuild your life, but obviously it was still very difficult. You probably saw some terrible things. You probably did some terrible things. And then the 10 of Rods reverse is about these responsibilities being relieved. I think that you were either rewarded for your service, or whatever battle you fought in, it was a decisive victory for your side and you were able to enjoy peace. Let's get some more cards here. We're going to pull 2 sets of 3 each. We'll let Spirit decide what those messages are going to be. They are going to be 2 distinct messages. All right, the first set is the King of Pentacles reversed. I am getting the sense that this is some sort of authority figure who drafted you, some sort of lord or powerful tribal leader, or even the government if you were part of, if your past life was in a more recent lifetime like World War II, and or the Vietnam War, I suppose, and you were drafted and you shouldn't have been drafted. We have the Tower, something happened suddenly. This makes me think where everyone thinks they're enjoying a normal life and then something stunning happens. What comes to mind here would be, from the American sense, Pearl Harbor or 9/11. You could have, obviously you're too young to have been born during 9/11, but unless you are particularly young, but this could also be a sense that maybe you were a soldier, you were trained, but you were a soldier during peacetime, and then when something happened, when there was a sudden attack, you had to actually go out and be a soldier. It wasn't just about training anymore. The Knight of Cups reversed, it wasn't a good war, right? With the King of Pentacles, which kind of gives this oppressive figure, the Tower, which is about something sudden. It could be bad governance, like it was a war that could have been completely avoided if the country was defended or the village was defended. And then the Knight of Cups reverse, it was a terrible war. Like, it was absolutely awful. Sometimes in movies and stories, people romanticize war. We often see this with fantasy books or historical fiction of like the Middle Ages, where people are like, oh, there's chivalry, there's like all those wonderful good things, but war is war and people die. And I think that was the case here. Your past life was very aware that to live by the sword was to die by the sword. And that was part of your purpose, was understanding that it's one thing to be a soldier, it's another thing to be a killer. And that's what you were trying to figure out, how to keep being a defender instead of someone who just attacks. The next card is the Queen of Cups. Now I'm getting some romance here. I'm getting a strong sense of romance there. We're getting the Two of Pentacles, not being able to balance things. And then we have the Hierophant reversed. So I think your past self was in love with someone. You were about ready to start a life, and then you were pulled from each other. This past life, you may have had many past lives, but this particular past life was likely to be a man, and you were likely married to a woman, or you were engaged to marry this woman. If you were a woman, it is possible to be a woman. There wasn't that many female fighters. It could have been you were a nurse, because we have the Strength card here, and you went into war even if you weren't technically fighting, but you were involved in the war effort. But I do think whoever you were either married or engaged to be married. You were about ready to start your life, and then everything got upended and you were separated from each other. And your marriage either ended or there was some sort of delay. Let's see what happened there. Spirit, what happened to this relationship? What happened here? This card popped out. We have the King of Swords reversed. Then we have the Seven of Swords. And then we have the Five of Pentacles reversed. So the King of Swords, my download from that card is it represents you. And then the Seven of Swords is about strategy. And then the Five of Pentacles reversed is about going back to church, going back to this Hierophant card, resolving some wrongs. I think whatever happened during this war or battle, it really changed you. You became a pacifist and you decided to turn your back on whatever led you to be drafted or being in the military and just focus on your relationship. So I do think your purpose in a past life was to understand the importance of defending who you love and not just attacking other people. Now, I do think that you weren't in a position of power, so you weren't able to change culture as a whole, but I do think karmically this stayed with you in life, and it's something you felt in this life. Let's figure out how that worked out by pulling some Soul's Journey lesson cards. We're going to pull 3 to figure out that karmic effect. Spirit, what was the karmic effect of this past life? What was the karmic effect? Another example of women going to war before nursing was a thing was often, I think in the case of a lot of Vikings and people in the European Middle Ages, and I imagine in other countries, is women would actually follow their husbands to war, and they would basically stay on the sidelines and watch, and they would cheer on. They would, I think the Viking wives would cheer out spells or something like that. That could also represent you too. You could have followed your husband on the sidelines and supported them on the sidelines. But the next card is success. I know that there is no greater goal than to love. So you learned from this past life, it has echoed into this life, that the important thing in love is not to win, is not to have power over another person, but to really appreciate the power of love and compassion. You know that make love not war really is what you should do in life. This goes back to the Strength card. This goes back to really having control of your inner beast and only using your power to defend others or to help others. The next card is change. I understand that nothing can grow or evolve without movement. I think that you, in your past life, were likely involved with some sort of effort to prevent war. Perhaps if you were a soldier, for example, you were able to rise in the ranks during that war, and then you did get a position of power, probably not ultimate power, but you were able to influence commanders, perhaps the truce ceremony, the truce like signing contracts to end the war when people sue for peace. You were able to really influence how the war was won. Perhaps you convinced your military not to pillage a town, not to hurt women and children, not to just kill people, maybe not to execute prisoners of war. I do think that you tried to live out like your make love not war philosophy, and in this life you probably feel that too. You either don't appreciate the war state of a lot of countries, or you really push forward the idea of coming to resolutions without fighting to get there. The third card is death. I am learning that endings are merely beginnings. I think that in your past life, you saw that all the death that occurred was a wake-up call. It really made people recognize that the conflict between your side and the other side was absolutely pointless. And so you were able to basically point at the pile of bodies and say, none of this was worth this. And in this life, you also look at any sort of really negative news about any sort of world event, saying none of that has to happen. Even if you may agree with a particular side in the war, you still see the war as being something that could have been avoided, that could be stopped now if people just looked at everybody who died and said, we can just stop this by coming to the table and negotiating a peace. So I really do think that you are someone who has learned the power of peace over war, and that's really, really a blessing on us all. If you resonated with this reading, be sure to like and subscribe for more. You can also go down into the comments or description of this video for links to my socials or a link to book a private reading. Otherwise, pile 3, I'm wishing you many blessings, and I'm so glad that we have people like you in this world.